So now that we've talked about urbanization, now we're going to move to 5.13, reducing urban runoff. So our goal here is by the end of the lesson, you should be able to describe methods for mitigating problems related to urban runoff. So remember, mitigating is reducing the impact related to urban runoff. So first, let's look at the environmental consequences of urban runoff. So we've mentioned this a few times, but it decreases infiltration, which is the water falling on the surface, getting down to recharge our groundwater. So looking here at the increasing amount of impervious surfaces in an area, so we're going from a natural area to a place with just a house, to maybe a suburb, to an urban area, we're getting 25%, or here almost 50% of the water is getting infiltrated, then we're down to 42%, then we're down to 35%, and lastly, only 15% of that water is making it back into the groundwater. Additionally, this rain can wash pollutants into storm drains and local surface waters, which eventually make their way into our drinking water. So let's talk about some solutions. So permeable pavers are specially designed to allow stormwater to infiltrate and recharge the groundwater. So you can see there's spaces between these pavers that allow water to come in. We've got layers of gravel down below, so that will filter out some sediment and larger particles before it gets back down into our groundwater. So positives of this is it decreases runoff, so we don't have urban flooding, decreases pollutants in the storm drains and local surface waters, and it also decreases the chances of flooding during heavy rainfall. Problems, it's more costly than traditional pavement, which seems to be the theme with many of these more sustainable solutions, is that the cost is a barrier to implementation. We also have rain gardens and bioswales. So this is what's outside of our classroom. Rain gardens and bioswales create habitat for pollinators, so you can plant flowers that attract pollinators. They store CO2. So here is a rain garden rendering for New York City. You can see these kind of just look like they're supposed to be nice places to visit. So if you're in the urban area, you may want to see some plants. They actually have a purpose. So above ground, we have these plants that are performing evapotranspiration, so putting that moisture back into the atmosphere, which is good for our microclimate. But underground, you can see that they are allowing that water to infiltrate back into the groundwater. Another solution is using public transportation. So public transit decreases urban runoff, decreases pollutants, and decreases CO2 emissions in traffic. So you're not sitting in traffic emitting all that CO2 if more people are taking a city bus rather than all those cars. More cars on the road leads to more pollutants on the streets. So this could include motor oil, pieces of tire, gasoline, antifreeze. All of these things end up in our water. More cars means more lanes for traffic. More cars means more parking spaces. All of these things lead to more impervious surfaces, which leads to more water runoff. Another solution is building up, not out. So rather than spreading your urban area out, you can just build up. So building vertically decreases impervious surfaces because you're not paving as much. So we see two cities here. We have Atlanta in the United States, Barcelona in Spain, similar populations, but look at the difference in urban area. So Atlanta is very spread out. I don't know if anybody's ever been there. It is not a fun place to drive. So it takes a long time to drive from each edge of Atlanta. So they're 4,280 square kilometers. Their carbon emissions, 7.5 tons of CO2 based on public and private transportation. That compared to Barcelona, which has a very small urban footprint of only 162 kilometers squared, they only emit 0.7 tons of CO2 for public and private transportation. So this decreases the amount that people have to drive to get from end to end of your city. A great solution to urban runoff. So our goal was to describe methods for mitigating problems related to urban runoff. To summarize, we talked about permeable pavers, rain gardens, public transportation, and building up, not out. I wanted to include this picture. This is a rendering for a green city to be created in Dubai in 2016. I don't think they ever actually implemented it, but the idea was to include green spaces for a sense of place. Remember, to increase that cultural ecosystem service. So maybe you just like nature.